Uh, Thank you very much, everybody. I'm surprised we got 25 people here, considering that we've got considerable competition on the telly. As I said earlier, it's the end of an era. And with that, I'm going to introduce our guest speaker. Nakuset is the executive director of the Native Women's Shelter here in Montreal. Recently, CBC Gem has released a short documentary, which yesterday I referred to as Making Nakuset. I apologize for that. It is Becoming a Nakuset. And that is going to be the gist of Nakuset's presentation to us today. This is an intimate and it's a personal history of Nakuset, who is a survivor of the 60s scoop and who was adopted into an affluent Jewish family here in Montreal. It's a story of hope, resilience, and it chronicles how she, with her Bubby, which is a Jewish grandmother, transformed her life and became the powerful advocate that she is today. I know that this woman is strong-willed and has a strong sense of self, and I'm very, very excited to welcome her. If I'm not mistaken, I believe that Nakuset is the Mi'kmaq word for the goddess of the sun. If I'm incorrect there, Nakuset, please let us know. And without any further ado, I welcome you, Nakuset. The table is yours.
Hi. So yeah, the name Nakuset actually just means sun. There is no goddess in the Mi'kmaq. It's not part of our community. But I'm Cree, and I got the name when I was in my 20s. I started working in the film industry and modeling, and I got it from a Mi'kmaq elder because when I introduced myself, and he was asking me about who I am, where I'm from, and I explained about being adopted, I really wanted a spirit name, a name to describe me. And as an elder, he, after meeting me for a couple of hours, he thought that the sun would be an appropriate name because, the sun is bright and it's strong, and he felt that would be a good name for me. And, I've been using it ever since. So I use it professionally. Obviously when I sign checks or, contribution agreements at the shelter, I use my English name, but I don't use my English name unless I have to. Because I think the hard thing about being adopted is that my birth family gave me a name, and then I was adopted and I received another name. So, different people call me different things depending where, which part of the country I'm at. And, being given a traditional name is like an honor. And, and it's also almost like a responsibility, right? In terms of, carrying a name that is representative of something strong, that you need to act accordingly. So, I've been working at the Native Women's Shelter since I'm 29 and I'm now 50. So it's a long time that I'm working here. Before I worked here, I worked at the Native Friendship Center. So I started to, when I had my sort of awakening and met my biological family, I started working in Indigenous organizations. And even when I was like acting and modeling, I only did Native jobs in terms of working in films or, other sort of Native themed projects, because that's what I wanted to represent. I remember going to, photo shoots, for Zellers, if you remember that company. And, they would put me in with the Asian girls because they just assumed I was, Chinese. And I'm like, how come there isn't a category for Indigenous? I was a little bit beyond, my time now. Thankfully they have more categories for Indigenous people. But I think that my experience being adopted and, re-emerging into the urban Indigenous community here in Montreal, I saw that a lot of people that were part of the 60s scoops were having an incredibly difficult time. So if you think of, the 20,000 at least Indigenous people that were adopted into non-Indigenous families, 85% of the adoptions failed. So what does that mean? It means that the kids ran away, or they have a lot of friends that have passed on, right? So once I was able to get my Indian status and use my Indian status to go to university and get a degree, I wanted to dedicate my education to help. And I got a degree in human relations from Applied Human Sciences, and it was all about developing programs. And that's what I did. So I've been at the Native Women's Shelter, and if you look at the website for the Native Women's Shelter, you'll see a lot of different programming. So I started the first. Where did I start? I started the Montreal Urban Aboriginal Community Strategy Network, which is now called the Montreal Urban Indigenous Strategy Network. I'm no longer affiliated with the network anymore. There's a new generation that's taking that on, but I was running that for 10 years. And through the network, I was able to start the Cabot Square project. And, that took about 4 years to get off the ground. A lot of the projects that I put forward are very lengthy because you need to convince the city and the funders that it's a good idea. So you have to be really perseverant. I also started the Ishkwe project on missing and murdered Indigenous women. So and that took about 2 years to get off the ground. The Native Women's Shelter is opening a second stage housing. It's 10 years that we have been working at this, and we will, break ground in the spring and have 23 units for Indigenous women that are single, as well as Indigenous women and their children. So 23 units supportive housing. So if you think of the Native Women's Shelter as being, a crisis center, the second step would be the supportive housing that we're going to have. And if the different sort of systemic racism that Indigenous people face, the Viens Commission came out in 2019 of September with recommendations, and about 30 of them were towards youth protection. Being part of the 60 Scoop was part of, a youth protection issue. We were either adopted, or a great number of us were just put into foster care. So that issue continues. There is an overrepresentation of Indigenous children in youth protection. And a lot of the times, the mothers don't get their kids back. And even though I've been working for many, 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 many years with youth protection, I still can't get a foot in the door. It's really, really hard. So what we're doing with our second stage housing is that we are having the Dr. Julian Foundation program as part of the second stage housing. So that's social pediatrics, which means that any woman that has a child that's been apprehended is going to have a team around her supporting the mother and child to ensure that the child comes back. It works in other communities, it works in other organizations, so it's going to work for us. And we're also going to open it to the community. So although there'll be 23, units, the main floor will be open to other community members that are struggling with youth protection, and we'll offer our professional services to them as well. Because, Indigenous women and their children need to be reunited, need to be stronger, for that next generation. So we have to make our own opportunities, because if we wait for the government to sort of be like, hey, we should probably help, we'll be waiting. The fact that the Viens Commission was, presented with all its recommendations, 148 recommendations, and no one has done anything. It's been ignored. This is why I have to do the work that I do, because, when you're in a leadership role, people expect, or, well, I don't know if they expect, but I think you hold that responsibility if you're in a leadership role to make change, and having that lived experience of knowing what it's like sort of propels me to continue to, move forward. And, I've had some success, and honestly, working at the shelter for, the over 20 years now, it helps. It's sort of like every year I build and build and build. So although some of the projects that I've worked on have taken, a couple of years, some of them 4 years, some of them 2 years, the latest project that I worked on is Resilience Montreal. So when the Open Door left the area of Cabot Square, there was a high rate of deaths that happened in the area because there were no support services. The only service was Chez Doris, and it only catered to Indigenous women that were sober. And unfortunately, because of all the different systemic issues that we have, not a lot of our people are able to do that, to be sober. At the Native Women's Shelter, we have a zero tolerance for drugs and alcohol, but if people are under the influence, where do they go? So by creating Resilience Montreal, we wanted to create it as a wellness center for the homeless. And that's kind of like a concept that doesn't really exist. Like, what is a wellness center? If you think of like, a cancer wellness center, you get an understanding that people that are suffering from cancer can come to a place where they're welcomed and they have services, and, they feel, sort of like a relief, and they're cared for. Well, when it comes to homeless populations, we don't always get that, right? And I remember when I was creating Resilience Montreal and I would speak to the different partners around the city, their idea of services were very minimal. So they would say like, okay, so you don't really need food. We can just give you granola bars, right? It's like, no, we have to have a budget for food. We have to have the best of the best. The idea is that if all these obstacles for Indigenous people that were facing them because of the systemic, racism. So what happens when people go to the hospital because of what happened to Joyce Echaquan. And we know that, a homeless man that was outside after the curfew and couldn't find a shelter froze to death in the street. So, all our people are facing these really huge obstacles. What we're trying to do with Resilience is to make it a wellness center that anyone can come in under any circumstances and receive good care. And how we were doing that before COVID was that we had all the different organizations come and visit us. So on a Monday, it could be a day that was just dedicated to housing, and we would get all the professionals to come in and be there. And then on a Tuesday, it could be for addiction. So we have Onondaga Treatment Center that would come in, and we have Foster's Pavilion that comes in. So the thing is that people who stay at Resilience, if they come in just for a cup of coffee or something to eat or for some clothes or just to rest, for sure you can have that. We welcome you, come in for that. But if they're sitting there and they also know that someone is here for addictions, they could be like, well, maybe today's the day that I'm going to address my addictions issues and go and make an appointment with them. So this is what we're originally in the process of doing. What happened with COVID is that basically we had to shut down. And well, we didn't really shut down. We just took our services across the street to Cabot Square. We wanted to be there with the people. So we put up a tent and we started to give out services at Cabot Square in terms of giving, having our staff outside, as well as bringing food across the street and bringing all our, clothing, and shoes and everything that people need. So during the end of March, we started to do this. And then the city of Montreal was sort of like, wait a minute, you shouldn't really be doing this. And then they're like, wait a minute, sounds like a good idea. You should do this. And we're going to help you. And we're going to open 4 other parks across the city so that we're doing the same thing. So they opened one in Amly-Gamelin and at Place du Canada, and one at the base of the mountain. And I forget where the other one was. So this became considered like a best practice, but it's not a best practice. It's a Band-Aid. It's giving people the minimum. And our staff stayed outside with them every single day during, COVID, and 7 days a week. And we were cold with them, but we supported them the best way that we could. But the thing is that, there's so much more that needs to be done. And it's been really hard during COVID. I mean, in the Indigenous community, during, I guess, it was announced on New Year's Eve that one of the shelters, 80% of their staff and residents had COVID positive results, and that 10 Indigenous people had COVID but hadn't received their COVID positive results and were walking around the city. So those 10 cases has now ballooned to, I think, 150 cases. So what do we do? The Native Women's Shelter, we decided, because we had already closed for 2 weeks during COVID, we ended up only allowing people that had COVID negative test results into the shelter, because we need to protect our staff and we need to protect the other residents that are here. And a lot of other shelters were following suit. And then this announcement of the curfew came in, which, was kind of outrageous that the, Legault government thought there was enough rooms. There was never enough rooms to begin with. And now with all the shelters sort of closing down, there were less rooms. So, we're in the process of always trying to work with the government, and what's interesting is literally right now, as we speak, Ian Lafreniere, who is the Secretary des Affaires Autochtones, the provincial, Indigenous Affairs Minister, is making an announcement at Cabot Square. Because I keep pushing, right? You have to keep pushing our leaders to do better. And I kind of know what he's saying because I had a conversation with him, but I guess I'm not going to say. You can check your news links right after this, conference call to see what he is announcing. But I gave him a lot of ideas on how he can support the Indigenous community. So he's doing something. And what's nice is that I'm able to mobilize, right? I'm able to find people to come together, during these crises. And for those that know of the Missing and Murdered Inquiry, one of the people that worked was Michelle Odette. She was one of the, I forget what her title was, but she was one of the people that was in charge of the inquiry. And she just wrote me today saying that she's sending people from different communities to come down to Montreal to help the homeless Indigenous population, which is wonderful, right? A lot of the times it's our own people that come to the aid, but I think that, I really push the government to do better, right? Whether it's Valerie Plante on a municipal level, or whether it's, Mark Miller, who is the Indigenous Services, person in charge, or if it's Ian Lafreniere. I have a conference call with, Mark Miller on Friday. So a lot of my job is chasing people around and kind of asking them to provide better services and to implement policies that have largely gone ignored, and to continue to create opportunities for Indigenous people so that they can get a step forward. Because it's been really, if you look at the Indigenous history, it's just been brutal. And I don't find it's getting easier, right? You would think it's like, it's not easy. It's hard work. But I'm lucky to be, sitting in this chair. I'm literally in my office at the Native Women's Shelter. I'm honored and lucky to be here, because if you look at my, Indigenous family history, my mother went to residential school. All my siblings are affected, through the 60 scoop, but some differently because they were fostered as opposed to me being the only one that was adopted. It really is hard to break out of that cycle. And for whatever reason, well, obviously because of my bubby, but not everyone is able to do that. So every day is a challenge, but I kind of love the challenge. It's just a kind of a weird thing to say. The other day I was talking to a funder, and they we're in the process of finding a new building for resilience, because where we currently are is going to be turned into a condo. So we need to continue the service, and we found a location that I love. The building is just ridiculously beautiful. And we're in the process of trying to get this building. We're working with Bâtir son quartier to find funding to buy the building. And yesterday, we're in a meeting, and we applied for 4.5 million, and they refused us. And when everyone around the table was sort of like, oh, and I'm like, I'm used to that. People always refuse me. It took me 10 years for second stage housing and 4 years for Cabot Square. I'm like, that's fine. I will find other people. This does not deter me at all. I remember talking to my contact at Bâtir son quartier, and he was feeling really sort of like upset and not sure what to do. I'm like, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I will find a way. We will find a way. There are people out there that care. And that's actually why I'm having a meeting with Mark Miller on Friday, to be like, let's go, as a responsibility, as someone in charge of Indigenous services. And I'm literally doing the work to help Indigenous people. If Mark Miller isn't willing to give us the money, then help me find that person who will. There's someone who will. I mean, I am literally today going to be sending a letter to Jeff Bezos' ex-wife, the one from Amazon. She received an enormous amount in her settlement during her divorce and is donating to organizations. So we're sending in a letter. You got to try every avenue, and something will work out. I mean, I'm hopeful. If I've gotten this far, it means that I'll continue to move forward. And it's sort of like this momentum that you grow, and you have other people that want to join you and move forward. And using every experience. I mean, this is kind of crazy, but I told one of the funders that I sent them the film, and I know the film is very emotional, and a lot of people see it and they cry. So I told someone, I'm like, okay, well, every tear that you give, you have to donate like $50 or $1,000 or whatever. Like, if I could use the film to help push for funding for the organizations, then that's a good thing. I really, when I filmed it, I was a basket case when I filmed it. Obviously, it's not easy for me to talk about my past, and I didn't really want to, but they felt it was important. The director, one of the people I worked with, I worked with Daniel Roher, who's Jewish, and he is a fantastic filmmaker. He did a film before called Once We're Brothers, that opened up at the TIFF, which is the Toronto International Film Festival. In 2019, he opened that film, Once We're Brothers, and it focuses on the group, the band, with Robbie Robertson. And if you watch the film, you find out that Robbie Robertson, his mother's Mohawk and his father's Jewish. So this guy has a thing for Jewish Indians. So, he approached me to do the film. And, I filmed it we did 3 hours of filming. And I cried in 2.5 hours of it, and he found 12 good minutes because I had no idea what he was going to do with all that footage. Right. And then in retrospect, I'm like, all right, well, now what? Right. Now that people have seen my pain, what good could come out of it? And if we could use the whole idea of resilience, right? If we can help the people that haven't had a bubby in their life, then we can the staff at Resilience are those people. They are those support people. They are those people that believe in you, that will listen to you, that will give you, that unconditional love that everyone else, has thrown you out of their places, that you have no family ties. You come and see us, and we're going to help you, and we're going to help you make that next step to autonomy, to whatever your your purpose is, right? Like at some point, they also need someone to believe in them. And that's what the idea of resilience is. It's literally why we called it Resilience Montreal. You're on the streets every single day. I've been working in this field for so long. And I still see people when I first came through the doors of the Native Women's Shelter that are still on the streets. And I probably could not survive like 5 days on the streets, right? And these are people that have survived for over 20 years on the streets. So just by the fact that they're still alive makes them resilient. And if they come through our doors and if we treat them with dignity and kindness, then that's a good day. And if we can also offer them or just give them that sort of inkling to, find housing, go to a doctor, go and, work on your addictions issues, see our psychologist. I also have a psychologist that comes every week. That is helpful. And that is something where you don't have to worry about being, ignored at a hospital or, racial profiled or whatever. You're welcomed in this space. And we are bringing the professionals to you so that you can use them. And eventually you'll be able to move from A to B. Whatever B is for you, it's not for me to say, it's for them to say. So I have talked enough, I think. I talk a lot. I'm sure you have some questions, but that's just the way I am. I'm like, blah, 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 blah. So I'll bring it back to you.
Well, I'm not sure, Nakuset, but I think that your name, the sun, makes a lot of sense because you're a fireball.
Okay.
I remember when you spoke to us 3 years ago, and you haven't changed since then. I've got a lot of admiration for you.
Thanks.
While we're here, just so you know, Sam Watts, who is the president of the Montreal Welcome Mission, or the Welcome Hall. I'll get there sooner or later. He's one of our members, and he's on with us today. And I just asked him. I said, "So, like, you've got some interaction with Nakuset?" He says, "No, actually, I've never met her, but please tell her hi, and that I've got great admiration for her."
I think I met him. I have met him. I met him at one of that meeting there with Julie Grenier when they were starting to talk about the wet shelters. We were in the same room.
Okay, well then that's a possibility then.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, we have a ton of questions here. I'm going to pass it over to Susan Buscemi because she's been collecting them while you've been speaking.
Okay.
Got it, Susan?
Yeah, I just had to unmute. Hi, Nakuset. Nice to see you here again.
Hi.
We've got Sri has a question. Maybe he'd like to ask it himself. Sri, if you want to unmute yourself.
Yes. I love your background, Susan. I want to be there.
Give you something pretty to look at. Go ahead, Sri.
The open sea, is that the real sea or what?
No, it's just a virtual background.
Okay. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. And thank you very much for the speech, very enlightening, eye-opening speech, Nakuset. Based on the introduction Jim gave and based on what you said, I noticed that you belong to, I think, 3 families. The first, your biological family, and then the foster family with who you are connected through your upbringing, and then your family by vocation, which is the Native Women's Society or whatever. Then you also talked a lot about the Brazilians. So please don't answer, if you don't like to. But my question is, which family at the bottom of your heart, which family do you actually connect to on a personal level? When you look at the mirror, whom you identify as? Okay, thank you. Over to you.
I always identified with being Indigenous. It's like it's in my blood, right? So, but because I was brought up by a Jewish family, I also have strong ties with the Jewish community. I do work with them, right? I mean, the film Becoming Nakuset is actually going to be presented at the Siegel Center. The Siegel Center is a Jewish theater. And last year, I worked with them on a a play called Children of God, which is about residential schools. So I was hired to bring Indigenous people into the Siegel Center to watch the performance, which is super powerful. That is like the most amazing play ever. But then also to have talkbacks, right? And being like, I always call myself a Jewish Indian, but having that conversation be with the community that it's largely Jewish, to sort of give them sort of a point of view of what it's like, living from both worlds. So yeah, the Siegel Center is going to be, presenting that play, and Rabbi Lisa Rushkow is going to be presenting. I have another Jewish Indian friend named Dan Milner who's also going to be there, and he used to work for Indian Affairs, which is like ridiculous, right? What are you doing working for Indian Affairs? You're working for the enemy. But he did, right? And he has like a very similar background. So, and I love working in Montreal. So, I mean, you take the best of everything, right? The amazing experiences that I had with, my Jewish family, I take with me, I carry them with me. With my biological family, I have a very, sad history. I eventually found my biological sister, and then she committed suicide 2 years ago because of the 60 scoop monies that they were giving to sort of apologize to all the 60 scoop, those that were affected by the 60 scoop. She wasn't eligible, and her experience, if my experience was like, on a scale of 1 to 10, if my experience was like a 5 in terms of, not smooth, hers was like a -15, right? And being told by the government that your lived experience is not worth money just pushed her over the edge. So, there's still a lot of healing that needs to be done in the Indigenous community. And I think everyone that comes to Montreal is living that. They're leaving their communities to come to Montreal to find better opportunities. And a lot of the times, that door is shut in their face. And, this is why I do the work that I do, is to try to open all those doors, to be like, let me find a way to help you, because, I had to find my way. My bubby helped me by, sending me back to my community, but there's still a lot of work to do. And I really feel like, I don't think I'll be able to accomplish it in my lifetime, but if, like I said, if I can aspire others to do the same work and to move in these places, that would be great. So we'll see, right? You just got to do your best, and that's what I try to do.
Yeah.
That was a
Thank you.
long answer. Sorry.
Thank you very much. I think you answered well. Thank you.
Thank you, Sri and Nakuset. Sorry?
There's no doubt that you've done your best. It's just amazing how much you've accomplished for such a young lady, like 25 years.
No, I don't know. I don't know how to answer that. I surround myself with really good people. So when I write a proposal, like literally the idea about writing to, Jeff Bezos' ex-wife, I have a professional writer that's helping me with it. If I wrote it, it may not sound so beautiful. When, he helps me write it, it's going to be like, psh, like she can't say no because it's going to be so well written. And well, she might say no, but you got to try. So I always align myself with people that are geniuses, kind of like Andy Warhol, right? Andy Warhol had so many people around him doing a lot of his work, and then he stepped back and he's like, it's mine. A lot of the work that I do, I surround myself with people that are consultants, that know more than I do. I give them sort of a draft idea about, I think this could work. They put it all together, then you present it, and then, the city or the, whoever is saying yes to it will be like, okay, that looks good. So, yeah.
I've got what is an inflammatory question. So someone is asking about government in action, and would you say it's a question of simple dollars, or is it a passive aggressive, I'm just reading this, passive aggressive genocide?
That's a tough question, right? I mean, like I said, I'm working with Ian Lafreniere, and he seems to, besides the fact that he's an ex-police officer, he seems to have, his heart in the right place. But I think that a lot of people in government get shuffled around in different sort of roles, and they may not have any expertise in that role. And it may not, like, I do the work that I do because I love what I do. I don't know if many politicians love what they do. Like, I should ask Mark Miller when I see him on Friday. Hey, Mark, you loving your job yet? Like, it's not easy, right? To do what you need to do. But I mean, sometimes I feel like if we are fully empowered, all right, let's say everyone is as strong as I am, every Indigenous person, or even stronger than me, what would happen, right? What would happen to Canada, right? If everyone was that strong. And sometimes it's sort of like, keep them down, keep them in their place. And it's almost like, working a lot with youth protection. I'm very pushy, right? And I remember one of the people that work at youth protection, I had seen them at the La Ronge Commission about, sort of the, on behalf of Indigenous people and what the families go through. And, he walked over to another colleague at youth protection and said to that colleague, so when is someone going to put Nakuset in her place? And that colleague just burst out laughing. And then I'm thinking, what does that even mean? Put me in my place. Where is my place? Is that, are you telling me to go back to the reservation? Like, is that my place? Like, do you remember when reservations used to be, they used to be manned by Indian agents and you had to have a pass to leave the reservation? Like, is that what you want? Is you want me to be sort of out of sight, out of mind, don't speak, don't advocate? I don't understand, but maybe that's what they want. It's hard to say what, some people have good intentions, in the work that they do. But I think that if you hold that sort of position where you're supposed to help Indigenous people, then you should be doing it. So I remember writing even to Trudeau and saying, you go to the UN and you talk about how you're going to help Indigenous people. Here I am, opening second stage housing, opening Resilience Montreal, working on all these projects. All you need to do is flow the money to me and I will make sure that we have all these services for Indigenous people. Never heard from him. He never wrote back to that press conference. Still waiting.
Okay. Thanks, Nakuset. I'm mindful of the time, so I'll just finish up with one question or comment. Deborah watched the film and said that, she saw that your bubby gave you unconditional love and you're carrying that forward. Can you just say a couple of words about your bubby?
I wanted to have girls. I have 3 sons. I was waiting to have girls so I can name my children after her, right? So she was that kind of woman that every time I walked into a room, her eyes would light up and she had the most beautiful laugh. And, she was just that person that keeps giving you those kernels of hope, just always positive words. And, I was just a very confused child and not knowing where I was going to go in the future and lots of like identity confusion. And she was just someone that always had kind words for me, always just wanted to spend time with me. And, like the film is a lot about loss. Like she believed that I would really be someone, I would do great things. And I had no belief, right? But this is why it's so important to give that kernel of hope, because even though she kept ingraining it in me and I was like, no, it's never going to happen. It's not going to happen. Because she kept giving that to me, it's sort of, you absorb it and then you step out and then you're like, oh, that's what she meant. Oh, I see, right? So, and honestly, right, she was so loving that she helped me become a good mother because I didn't have a role model. My biological mother went to residential school and was very abusive. And then I had, I was adopted, and I'm not really going to talk about that relationship, but it wasn't positive. So how do I become a good mother? Well, because I had my bubby. And because she was so loving, I am, you know, it's like I'm channeling her, you know, with my children. And my kids are so loving. Like every single day they come up to me and they tell me they love me. I tell them I love them. There's lots of hugs, you know, there's lots of care. They are secure in their culture, in, you know, that they are loved. And I'm breaking that cycle, right? Like all my other siblings, my biological siblings, all of us were placed in care. I am the first generation to keep my children. My children have never seen alcohol. They don't know of that. Like I'm breaking that. So I credit her for everything. Like really, if I'm a kind person today, because of my bubby. So, oh, I should show you 1 minute. And that's the award that I got so many years ago, 2014. I was kind of thinking when I got the award that everything was going to go downhill. It's like you get an award and then you plateau, but keep moving up. So we'll see how long.
I think she's with you every day.
Yeah.
I think she put you on this path, and not just with your children, but with the work that you do. I
hope
really
so,
love
yeah.
the film.
I'm glad you liked it. It was very, 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 very hard to film. And I was nasty. I was so mean. I was so mean.
I'm sure
I was mean, but you know, I remember telling the director, you know, I'm like, all you want to hear about is my trauma? Really? Like, you find this entertaining?
But we heard about your grandmother, and that was wonderful. I suggest everybody, if you get a chance, to watch
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
film.
it's a hard watch, though. It's not easy. A lot of people cry when they watch it. I guess if you have that connection to someone like a bubby, like a grandmother, and you've lost that, you feel it, right? So yeah, so I appreciate you guys watching it, and I appreciate your good words. You know, it's a lot for me to sort of, I'm a very private person, so it's a lot for me to sort of process right now that everybody knows my business.
Well, thank you for telling us about her.
I'll tell you what, Nakuset, we'll take the link for the doc. I'm going to send it out to all our members again.
Okay.
And I suppose while I'm at it, maybe I should send it off to Justin Trudeau. Well, what the hell? And just so you know, and I think we should, we'll also send it off to one of our honorary members who happens to be the Honorable Paul Martin.
Yep.
Yes. Paul, pardon?
Yeah. Didn't he adopt a Native kid?
I'm not sure about that, but I know he's very, very involved in,
I think so.
we say the autochthon community. He is going to be speaking to us. I don't think anybody else knows this yet. 14th of April, Paul Martin is going to be speaking to the Rotary Club of Westmount.
Wow, that's impressive.
So we will be, we will definitely let you know about it. We're going to let everybody know about it, mind you. And we'll find a way to get the link of this to him. He's probably already seen it or will see it, because I know he's very, very into the whole Indigenous issue. But we're going to see what happens. In the meantime, I'm going to ask our thanker emeritus, Mr. David Franklin, to express our gratitude to you. Go ahead, David.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can.
Nakuset, while you were giving your presentation, a new chapter was opened in the United States. Biden became the 46th president of the United States. A new chapter. And maybe this date, we should open a new chapter to learn more about your women's shelter. You've been very candid about your personal history and how you have, to use your expression, opened doors with love and dignity to members of your community. I'm sure that many of our members were not aware of the mandate that you have, that we live really in two solitudes, our community and your community. It's about time that we join forces to help your people. Thank you for your presentation, and I hope that Rotary will assist you in carrying out your wonderful work. Thank you.
Thank you. I need all the help I can get. So send help.
Well, we'll see what we can do.
All right.
As is my custom after David gives his thank you, I always let the crowd know what I thought on a basis of 10 out of 10. And normally he can't see the screen, but I just hold up my hands and I tell him what I think about his response. So David, if you can see this, God bless you. If you can't, I'm never going to tell you.
And I was
Thanks.
hoping 11 out of 10.
Get over it, Bubba. Thank you very much. Duty assignments for next